Good evening, everyone. I'm John, the Center Manager of the Yuchong Early Childhood Development Center. I'll be helping with the webinar this evening. We're so glad to have Ms. Nicky Weir to speak to us this evening about the relationship of learning through play and optimal brain development. Ms. Nicky is currently the Director of Practicum and Professional Development in YCC ECE and formerly the Western Co-Principal in YCIS ECE Hong Kong. Ms. Nicky has over 20 years of extensive educational experience, as well as almost 10 years of leading and managing as a principal in early childhood settings. May I now pass the time to Ms. Nicky?
Thank you, Joan. Hi, everyone. We're so grateful that you're giving up your evening to be with us. We hope that you gain some valuable insights or at least some inspiration. And we just really value the opportunity to share some of our work with you and look forward to hearing from some of you in this session too. So it's not just me talking throughout the evening. I'm going to be taking you on a little bit of a journey through linking learning through play to optimal brain development. We have had some very exciting developments with neuroscience recently, really being able to see a physical brain in action from birth. And much of neuroscience is actually proving what we've known for a long time, that play is really, really important for children's development and really important for their overall health. But brain development is specifically important because the brain really is where it all begins. All of the other healthy development relies on a healthy brain. So I would like to actually introduce you to a short video designed by Harvard University's National Scientific Council on the Developing Child. It's not very long, but it's very informative. So watch with me for a little bit.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Right, so just to recap a little bit of what we've heard from the scientists at Harvard, we understand that with brain development, children are actually gaining information that are stimulating these neurons through their senses. They gain information from sight, from sound, from touch, movement, pressure, taste, smell. This is how the brain accumulates all of that information, which stimulates the neurons firing. And that's a good thing. We want these neurons to fire. As we've heard, we also know that there's extreme rapid growth from birth to the age of 3. At this stage of life, your brain, it develops so rapidly that it actually starts to begin to need to prune. So in the first 3 years of the life, the brain starts making neurons through our experience of sensory input. You can see from this diagram, when a newborn comes out into this world, they have basic neurons that are now ready for sensory input. They're ready for experiences. As the child begins to interact with the world, these neurons start to build, firing, connecting with each other. By the time they're 2, they have a very extensive network going on in the brain. With this extensive network, the brain cannot sustain the amount of firing, so the brain starts to actually prune any connections or pathways that are not being used. So what we find with the brain is that if the pathway is being used repetitively, it starts to strengthen, called myelination. When it starts to strengthen, it becomes a quicker, more effective way of messaging. Any neurons that were established that don't get used repetitively, the brain actually starts to prune itself and dies off. And this is how we actually get what they call brain mapping. So every child, all of us have a unique picture of what our brain neurons look like, where there are strong connections, where there are what they call main highways. So it's extremely important in early childhood when we consider that the child's brain is literally mapping its thinking in the first 7 years of its life. We also know that with neurons, like we saw in the diagram from the newborn through to the 2-year-old, neurons start with the basic. We also know this when we talk about concrete learning versus abstract learning. A child's brain development starts on a very basic level. They need to build neurons in the first phase. Once these neurons have connected, they can start to become more and more complex. So they start with basic introduction of information or knowledge. Then with life experiences, they're able to build it by connecting what they've previously learned with what they're learning. And the more that they learn, the more connections they're able to make, the more complex their brain can actually process. So this is very important for us to remember later when I talk about learning and play. We need to understand that children's brains need maturation. We cannot hurry them, force them. We need to provide an environment that's healthy in giving sequential development. Because if the foundation is not strong, then there'll become a lot of other problems. We also know that there's this interaction between biology and environment. So we've got nurture and nature. We know that all of us have got DNA, and in our DNA, we have information about who we are, right? So our personalities, our IQ lies in there. Basically, the potential of who we are as a person is wrapped up in our DNA. But we also know through research that nurture, the environment in which a child actually grows up in, has a huge impact on developing that potential within the DNA. There are many children who may have a potential for being really artistic or extremely good with music. But if they've never given the opportunity to interact with an instrument or given the opportunity to create, they may never actually develop the neurons that are needed in the brain to create this instinctual thinking. And so we need to understand that with children, there is a certain amount of natural ability within them, but a lot of ability, a lot of capability actually is given to the child through the care of their primary caregivers, so their parents, their families, and most certainly through schools. This is very important for us to remember. When we talk about children, when we look at neuroscience and all of these neurons that are starting to fire and develop, there is a lot of research proving that children are born with a capability of learning. We don't need to force children to learn. Their brain is wired to take in the world around them. It's biologically within them to learn. They're interacting with people, they're interacting with the environment, and when they do this, the sensory information goes into the brain and neurons are built, pathways are built. What I want to say at this point, for us as educators and caregivers, I think knowing that the brain works like this is the stage of life where we can develop within the brain the belief that I can learn, the belief that I'm a capable and competent person. And this is essential in later learning. When children have an instinctual thinking pattern, that I'm a learner, that I'm very capable of learning, this self-belief success further perpetuates in success. So when we're thinking about brain development and the importance of the first years of a child's life, I think as adults, it's very important for us to know that intrinsic motivation actually begins now when they're this young, and how we view their learning is essential. Do we want to just have them rote learn, or do we want to teach them how to learn? Do we want their brain to develop neural pathways of how to learn and how to contribute? Something else I want to share is that the brain has what they call mirror neurons. And there's a lot of recent research, even ongoing right now in the world of neurology about these mirror neurons. But for early childhood, what is essential is that these mirror neurons actually mimic the environment. So they're looking at their primary caregiver, they're looking at the significant people in their lives, their siblings, the peers that they see a lot, so friends or family, maybe their schoolmates that they're spending day after day after day with. And children's brains start to mimic what they see. So they will mimic facial expressions, they will mimic tones of speech, obviously speech itself, accents. So when we understand that a baby's brain and a young child's brain is literally absorbing and mirroring what it sees and has experientially around them, we realize how important the adult role is to ensure that the neural networks that are being established are positive ones. If we want children to be empathetic and understanding and self-controlled, then we need adults in their lives who are empathetic, understanding, and self-controlled. But this goes for reading. When we talk about children developing good reading skills, we encourage parents, showcase reading, be a role model, let the children see you reading, read with the children, because we understand that in a child's brain, these mimic neurons, these mirror neurons are extremely powerful in creating that map, in creating those pathways that a child is going to use to think and become. So it's very important to remember. Now, looking at the brain, and as we've seen in the video, every repetitive experience builds neurons and pathways. This will become children's instinctual thinking way. If, for an example, would be when a young child, a 1-year-old, starts to learn to walk, they fall more than they walk, right? The falling process is important because it teaches them how to protect themselves. When they're little, when they fall, it's not too far from the ground. So in general, it's not going to hurt them in a serious way, but it is giving their brain essential knowledge in how to balance, how their body can maneuver. And of course, when they fall, they learn to put their arms out in front of them. Now, when children have not had opportunity to fall at a very young age, we actually have seen this when children are overprotected in that walking process. When they're older, they haven't got the instinctual brain thinking process of how to protect themselves. There's no sudden understanding of putting my hands out, or I can feel my body is about to react. So my brain is able to really quickly come up with a response. This is why we need to understand that in brain development, repetition is essential. What our children are doing and receiving at home and school on a repeated way really will affect how their brain develops. So when we think about brain development, we're talking about things that often get neglected in education. Example would be problem solving. We want to be able to create strong problem solvers. Problem solving comes from thinking. Problem solving happens neurologically. If we're not able to provide these natural occurrences in children's lives where problems are just consequential through play or daily routine, we're not giving their brain that exercise to build and establish really strong problem-solving neurons. The same can go for creativity. If children are not given repetitive, ongoing exposure and time in a creative process, we limit physically the brain's neurons. And many times the brain can start pruning the creative part of a child's brain because they're not using it. So this is why even within our educators and within our college, we really showcase to students the importance of creative thinking, creative time, both with their peers and individually, and expression, allowing children time to truly express their inner world, because the pathways are being built, and we want to make sure our students that grow up, the children that grow up, are strong thinkers, strong creative thinkers, strong problem solver thinkers. We want thinkers who can take risks, but who can take educated risks. And all of these can actually be built in children at a young age. But the opposite is also true. And we see this as educators, and it's really sad because the repetitive experiences of children can also build those negative pathways. We often see, well, not often, but more than I'd like to, we see children who have anxiety issues or who are fearful in certain instances. And a lot of that comes from just repetitive interactions within a home or within a school. When a child is often being told they're naughty over and over again, or being yelled at or scolded or punished on a regular basis, the brain is mapping. The brain neurons are mapping a message to the child. And often it's low self-esteem, you can't trust yourself, don't be confident. It can result in fearful, instinctual behavior. So we have to remember with children's brain development, the kind of environments that nurture that I talked about earlier really does play a role in how a child's brain is mapped, and those instinctual thinking skills that we embed. Very quickly, I would also like to talk a little bit about stress on the brain. Research, which we'll see now in a moment, has shown that excessive stress on the child's brain can actually physically disadvantage growth. What I want to say is that often in early childhood, we have extremes. We have parents who try to ensure that their child is never stressed. And so they will problem solve for the child, and they will, we call them helicopter parents. And a normal amount of life stress is actually good for the brain, because neurologically, when stress happens, our body excretes cortisol and adrenaline. When we're adults, we have this, if we're in a car and someone comes running across the road, we have to be able to slam on the brakes. Or when we're at work and we have a deadline, then we know we've got to get going a little bit faster. Working with stress is very normal and very good for us as humans. So as a child, we don't need to overprotect them. If a child is taking another child's toy, the child is going to cry, the stress is happening. And in this situation, this will help a child to learn to how to handle themselves when all of that emotion is there, all of those adrenaline is pumping. And this is where really nurturing caregivers can teach a child how to calm down and process the emotion, and then the brain is actually experiencing how it can bring dopamine and bring the adrenaline down. Now, in excessive stress, now this is when children's needs are not being met, they're going hungry, or they're in an emotional environment that's very aggressive, very unsafe. When there's a lot of extreme stress on a brain, then this is what happens. It stops growing. It physiologically stops growing. So what we see with neuroscience is a lot of children who have unhealthy amounts of stress in their life. It actually starts to form some type of brain deformity. And that's why we often see with children at risk, we often see that they need extra support in their learning because of the negative effects that the excessive stress has had. So a little bit of stress is healthy, but we have to remember we don't want to put children under unnecessary stress because it's not good for the brain. This is just a PET scan of a healthy brain. On the left, you can see the red is activity. Nurtured child in a very good care. The one on the right is a brain from a child who's been neglected and in an orphanage and under a lot of stress because the child's needs are not being met. So we can see that stress in an unhealthy way really does affect brain development. So I want to talk a little bit about education. In early childhood, education is becoming well known in that James Heckman has really, his research has really supported the necessity of quality early childhood education. And looking at what is quality early childhood education and how can education really help our children develop healthy, so healthy brain development and healthy development overall. If we think of our children as being empty and we have to mold them into what we want them to be, then we're not going to support the brain development. We're going to put a lot of parameters around a child that may or may not be healthy for them. I want to just quote Socrates. He said, "Education is not the filling of a vessel, but the lighting of a flame." And I like this quote because it brings us back to the idea that every child is born with potential, all wrapped up in their DNA. They have what they need to be the successful person that they are. Our job is to just light the flame. We need to let it out. We need to create an environment where the brain can express its ultimate and optimal potential. All right, what does this have to do with play? So one of the things about brain development is that the brain has responsibilities in different areas. So there's an area that's responsible for speech, for sensory, for movement, for writing, for executive functioning, for your personality. But the thing that we heard earlier in the video is that all these areas are actually interconnected. When we think about development, we cannot just focus on one area. We cannot just say, oh, now we're going to teach you to read. Reading and writing is connected with personality. It's connected with motor development, so physical movement. It's connected with speech. When we understand that the human brain cannot be dissected and concentrated on, it's actually integrated, it works together, then we can understand early childhood a little bit better. So I want to say that quality early childhood programs across the world have all recognized the integrated need for learning. We have EYFS from England, early years foundation stages, that understands that there's a whole child. We're looking at communication and language, physical development, understanding of the world, mathematics, literacy. Hong Kong's curriculum it also looks at languages, math, sciences, technology, your personal, emotional, and social development, arts and creativity. So really, when we understand how children learn and how to ensure optimal brain development, we need to understand that integration and holistic learning is essential for healthy brains. So, one of the things about play. Now, I could talk all night about play. I'm very passionate about play, and I've seen play really bring children to incredible heights of intellect and academic and just great contributors to society. But I'm going to touch very, very shortly on some of the play and how we can see brain development happening. Now, sensory play is research shows us that sensory input is essential. When we think about a newborn coming out of the world and being held and touched and spoken to, fed, we understand that all the time those neurons are firing, the neural pathways are being developed. Sensory is so important for children, and sensory in terms of exploration. We don't want to stop children from playing with sand or getting messy. Getting messy is really healthy for their brain development. When their hands are covered with a substance that they're exploring, that they're learning to manipulate, in the brain, there are so many levels of neurons firing. They have sound and sight that's now connected with feel and touch. Even the manipulation of the material, their brain's developing neurons about fine motor control, crossing midlines. We're talking about moving the body and the fingers and coordinating all of that. As they get older, the sensory play gets a little deeper. They start to understand the substance and what can it be applied to. When we first work with paint in our infants and toddlers, they're just exploring, what is this? They're learning about its feel. They're learning about how it works, how it's manipulated. By the time the child gets to 2 and 3 years old, they realize that this substance can go onto something. I can draw with it. I can create. I can make an image to represent something else. And then, of course, when you get to 5 and 6, it becomes an even deeper understanding of paint. I understand that the paint doesn't dry straight away. I have to wait for it to dry. So it's the same with all kinds of materials. Children scientifically need to engage a sensory world. This is how the properties of science and the knowledge that leads to application is really so important. Now, I would like to invite one of our guests to share with us, what do they think in this sensory play here right now with this young man? What kind of neurons and parts of the brain are busy firing while he's engaged in sand play? Who's brave enough to share with us? Oh, and if you are, please raise your hand. Joan will help identify you.
I can see Clifford. Hi, Clifford. I've allowed you to talk. Would you like to unmute yourself and share with us?
Hi. Apologies in advance. My baby's actually eating right next to me. So in case you guys hear any baby noises, I'd say obviously touch. He's experiencing. Also sound, from the sound of the sand rustling between his fingers. Sight, from seeing how the sand interacts and how it flows through his fingers. I said touch already.
Yeah.
And I guess as a start, that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Clifford. You're very brave.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. All of those things. And the other thing that sand provides in terms of neural development is mathematical, because when we're working with sand, children are learning about weight, heavy, light. They're also learning about full and empty. We also look at shape, like you can use, in this case, it was wet sand. So he was busy compounding it to build a tower. So it's manipulation of form and space. So just in one sensory interaction or experience, actually there's a lot going on in their brain. And yes, you're right. All of the sounds and feels and touches are really bringing his brain alive. Right, and also, as you can see, and I'm sure parents, I don't know how many parents we have on here, but we can see this as well with our children as they grow, how their play develops. You know, in the beginning, it really is just about the touch. They're so excited about the experience of the touch. By the time they get to this level, I think this boy is about 4 years old, you know, they can apply what they've already learned when they were younger. They know what sand can do. They understand the properties. Now they get to manipulate and they get to create and construct. And a lot of that engineering brain turns on. So the other play I want to talk about briefly that's also really essential in brain development is role play. And I'm sure, again, parents who have children at home may have seen role play, but role play, and even in education centers and schools, role play needs time. We need to let children play. When we role play, there is so much multi-layered learning that goes on in the brain. Again, we're awakening such a wide variety of the brain. When you have role play, these children are actually bringing forward their experiences that they've had. So they're recalling experiences, they're using knowledge that they have already, and then they're putting it into practice. And this is just one play script, which is doctor, some very famous play script, because the reality is, who likes to go to the doctor and get an injection? Nobody. And I know children don't. So they get an opportunity to become the doctor, understand the role that's assigned. So we're constructing knowledge of the world. We're trying to understand. We're practicing. It helps my emotional resilience because now I can role play without the danger of being in the actual situation. At the same time, we're learning vocabulary. We're learning concepts. If play is done nicely and really thoughtfully, we can create levels of understanding. We can talk about vaccinations and what do vaccinations do for us, or we can talk about bandaging and broken bones. We can look at the skeleton, we can look at x-rays, that's what's inside your body. And this is all happening at one time, which means the whole brain is lighting up. Not only am I gaining knowledge, I'm also using vocabulary to connect. So now I have to take the vocabulary that I know, like injections or medicine or you're sick, lie down, or whatever the case may be. I've got to apply how to use this to communicate a message. And as a patient, I have a different message than I do as a doctor. So when we look at role play, we really value the rich learning that happens in role play, especially when role play is provided well within a setting. And then when children have that interaction with adults, because as adults, we can extend it. We know a little bit more than them, so we can introduce concepts, we can introduce ideas, we can introduce language that they don't know, but that makes sense in the context of the play. An example I'd like to use that because this is a very common one for young children, and I know in play-based programs they'll see this, and if parents play with their children at home, the toddler loves to feed you, right? They come with their bowl and their spoon, and then they try and pretend food in your mouth, or they give you a cup and they want you to drink from the cup because this is their experience. This is what happens with them. We feed them, and they're learning about food and their bodies and all of this. By the time a child gets to 2-3 years old, the play is developed. Now they're going to cook, and they add, spaghetti, or they add their beads or their bowls, and they turn and they mix and mix and mix because they've seen mom cooking or dad cooking, or they're cutting. So there's a lot of action around preparing food. Now their play is at a slightly deeper level. And then the interaction with you is also at a slightly deeper level, because now you have to like their food, and they're going to make you a pizza, and we're going to talk about the pizza. Then we see children who are older, 5-6 years old, who now can master play. They've created whole menus. They've written the ingredients down. They have put pricing on their menu items. They are waiters and waitresses. They take your order. They give you a bill. They make you your food. Then you have to pay them. Of course, they like the money. Then they have to work out the change for you. So the mathematical understanding, the concepts is much deeper and much more layered. So what we see with role play is it's a perfect way to allow the brain to develop sequentially. And this is how we ensure that children are really getting the all-rounded learning that we're talking about. Play can embed academic skills, especially with skilled educators, but even parents at home. Being playful just means that you're understanding the brain and where a child is at and how to attract that brain to kind of lighten up and just, get going with really strong connections. All right, so here we've got role play, and so we talk about knowledge, even physical interaction, or even working with your own body, languages, maths. So I would like another brave soul who would raise their hand and tell us what kind of learning is happening here in this role play. I'm sure we have some educators on. Yay, Laura.
Or Laura, hi.
Hello. Hello. So this time, because there's someone else there and they're an adult, there'll be a level of like verbal communication going on as well. I'm guessing this is like shop assistant and someone buying. So there probably will be some maths, and he's made choices to the things that he's bought. So there'll either be visual choices, or if he's tried these fruits before, this boy's going to choose things based on his, things that he personally likes. So there's a lot more choice, and he can express himself in different ways. But definitely the communication there is this time, whereas last time with just the sand, it was just a one-on-one learning experience.
Great, Laura. Are you a teacher?
Yes, I am.
Laura?
Yes.
Yes, I can. Great. That's a great answer. And you're right. The interaction with the adults and can scaffold a little bit of that further, like I was saying, further concepts and development. And yes, Daddy is the teller, and the son is the shopper. And they're having conversation on the items he has chosen, like you said. And even thinking about executive functioning, and you've brought up choice, which I'm really glad you've done. Executive functioning, understanding that children can think about their own thinking and know that they have choices, and then how they have to be able to support the choices that they make. So really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'm gonna take you, I hope you don't mind me reading, but I'd prefer to keep it in the words of the teacher. So at the Pamela Peck Discovery Space, we, and you've seen these are examples actually from Pamela Peck Discovery Space. One of our teachers put together some of these pedagogical documents, documentation that kind of just a learning story of a child and what they might be going through when they're engaged in exploration and play. So I'm going to read the story. We have visitors, so we don't always know their names. So this young lady is referred to as the girl. not very original, but we can understand. So in our creative studio, we have set up a provocation, so an invite for exploration and play around design and choices of many different kinds of materials, colors, and mediums to work with. All right, so a child goes into the art room and immediately engages the dummy model. She grabs a piece of pipe cleaner and twists it around the neck of the model. The child manipulates the material and uses it to make a necklace. She takes another one, twists it first before putting it around the neck again. She knows that the materials there can be manipulated to make what she wants. She uses open-ended materials effectively. She heads over to the scissors and retrieves a pair to cut off a piece of ribbon. After cutting the ribbon, she places the ribbon on the model's neck. Then she takes a piece of felt paper and takes a double-sided tape from the materials tray to put some tape on the felt paper. She seems to be aware that the tools around the room can be used, and she uses them freely to create jewelry from different materials. After putting the double-sided tape on the felt paper, she rips off the sticker to expose the sticky side, but the felt paper got stuck together. Problem solving for a solution, she changes her strategy and material choice to better suit the double-sided tape. She sets it aside and takes pink crepe paper and tries to stick the double-sided tape on it. She sticks the crepe paper on the back of the model and creates a robe. The girl takes the purple-colored fabric and cuts it. She wraps it around the bottom of the model and tapes it together. She then takes the pink-colored fabric next. She actively manipulates materials to achieve a planned effect on the dress she is making, and also selects a wide variety of tools and techniques to shape, assemble, and join the different materials together. The girl then cuts the pink fabric and wraps it around the model just like the purple one and tapes it around the model. She is showing her ability to accurately measure the width and length of the fabric and adjust the fabric accordingly. I ask her if she wants some more colored fabrics, and she nods. I take a couple more colors out, and she takes the blue fabric, cuts it, and adds it on top of the previous fabric. She is exploring how mixing different layers and colors have an effect on the look of the dress, while she demonstrates independence in carrying out her self-chosen task. The girl continues on and takes the gold fabric and cuts a piece off the roll. This time she wraps it around the top of the model. She first sticks one part with tape and then sticks the other side with tape to secure the fabric to the model. She is showing passion and energy in what she is doing and has maintained focus on her project for a long period of time. After wrapping the top on the model, the girl goes and grabs the watercolor paint and a paintbrush. She is capable, knows where to get material she needs for a project. She takes a paper cup and then tries to color the cup with water paint. She sees that it doesn't work too well and goes over to the cups containing poster paint. She is reviewing how well the method works and is changing her strategy once again in how to color the paper cup. She sees that the poster paint can provide more color and uses that. She puts back the watercolor paint on the shelf where she got it and continues to color the cup with poster paint. I ask her, what is it? She did not reply, but puts the cup back on puts it on her head. Then I ask, is it a hat? She nods her head and then puts it on the model. This child has demonstrated her growing knowledge, skills, and understanding of design, mathematical concepts, engineering, use of technology, scientific properties of material, and her thinking and imagination. Right, so this is just one example of a child. Again, we don't have an adult interacting here, and we do know that when adults join children, it can also add a layer of a lot of learning within the brain. But what I wanted to show was that in an open exploration where a child has choice and interaction with materials, the brain is very busy, and her work is really stimulating. It gives her the ability to concentrate and be motivated, and ultimately leaves her with a sense of achievement. And this is important for the brain's development. We need children to feel achievement. We need children to be able to have ideas, be able to process and implement those ideas, problem solve, and like a scientist, explore and analyze and respond accordingly. So just in this experience, we've got problem solving, we've got integrated learning, imagination, engineering, design, and so much more. So when we work with students and other educators, we do like to promote play, and because of its incredible stimulation on the brain in a very holistic, multi-layered way. But often parents or educators would say, where do I start, or how do I do that? So there's just a couple of things, kind of reminders for many of you, I'm sure, but things to remember when we are thinking about healthy brain development for young children right through to the age of 7 and further. The first thing we like to say is please make sure there is a lot of sensory play. Even cooking, baking with children, is such an incredible brain-rich learning experience where they're getting a lot of sensory input, and together with that, they're getting mathematical skills. They're learning about science because they're actually having a literal science experiment when we take various materials, we combine them, we add heat energy, and voila, we have a science experiment. We have a totally new item. So we want children to engage in sensory play. We like Play-Doh, sand, water, take your child to the beach. It's a great brain developing experience. We all love the ocean. Engage children through interaction that is playful, empathetic, and social in nature. Knowing that children have these mirror neurons is our opportunity to role model sound behavioral responses, interactions. This is where we lay the value for our children. This is how children adapt to culture. This is how they absorb their family culture, the wider culture, society. And we want children who are going to be positive societal contributors. We need children who want to solve world hunger or our pollution or the very many things that are happening in the world right now. And that really starts with the adults in their life. We need to be able to role model what it's like to be a positive contribution to society and be actively involved in engaging our children with that. So be playful, be empathetic, and be intentional in how you interact with your child or with your children in your classroom. Keep learning, keep learning and play meaningful and age appropriate. Again, we're looking at stress. When we don't understand that the brain is developing at the rate it's developing, we can sometimes put children under tremendous stress, and stress in a negative way. When children are not developmentally ready for some of the more academic work and we try to push it on them, it can sometimes further disadvantage the brain. What we want to understand is where are they in terms of their sequential learning, in terms of the brain development, in terms of their maturation, and then introduce the next step, not the next 500 steps. We just want to continuously be challenging the brain, but in a way that keeps it a very positive, very stimulating, which then really allows that brain to achieve a lot more than if we try to input negative traumatic stress because we haven't understood how children's brains develop. And then the next one is creating stimulating environments for free play. Free play provides so much for the brain. It's great for executive functioning. It's great for problem solving, initiating, communicating, emotional regulation, resilience. There's just so much value in free play, and especially when children can play with other children. It provides ample opportunity for the brain to develop social skills and communicative skills that our children really do need to be successful in the future. And now, we want to ensure ample physical, engaging play, understanding that the brain is holistic and that every area is really important. We don't want to focus so much on one area of the brain and neglect other areas of the brain. We have to understand that physical development is essential to brain development, but also to all-round development. We know now that children who didn't crawl or didn't have ample opportunity to have upper body strength, it can affect their writing and reading in a very negative way. So we want to make sure that children have a lot of physical play. They need to run, they need to ride bicycles, they need to climb, they need time, they need repetitive experiences for the brain to develop what it needs. We also need to provide children with choice in play that is natural and consequential, which I've shared a lot about already. We need to encourage master playing, in-depth, holistic, layered playing. We need to provide children with opportunity where they can really take their play to whole nother levels. When we think about restaurants, we invite them into creating menus and then even making their menus. Let them bake and cook and cut. Let them have the ability to price it. invite the parents to come to the restaurant that they've named. The more master playing that we can give children, really the better for their brain development. And of course, it creates a sense of excitement about life, and also it gives them a sense that they're achievers and that they are part of this world, an equal part of this world. They're not just children, but they're actually an equal part of this world with us adults as well. Educators should link play to curriculum and developmental domains. So when we think of education, remember the whole brain. Let's look at the quality curriculums that integrate and look at the holistic learning. And then as professionals, we really need to showcase this to parents. We really need to show them how and where children are learning and how it's building a better future for their child. And of course, diverse play as well for all the areas of the brain. So I know this is it's really tough to go very in depth in such a short space of time, but I do hope that I've been able to inspire some play advocates. And we really believe that play is essential for building a better future for our children. We see that play helps so much emotional maturity and resilience, really happy, healthy children. And the brain is really strong. So we don't want to be fearful that if we're not forcing or pushing, that our child will not be successful. We want children who have been given the opportunity to showcase just how magical they are within their own potential, and given the space to really believe that that can come out and that will come out. Now, I'm coming back to our audience. Who is brave enough? We would like someone to, well, I'd like all of you to reflect with me a little bit. The first reflection question I have is, what type of neural connections or pathways are you as the educator or as a parent or caregiver, grandparents, what are you providing your children in their daily learning or their daily routine? What kind of neural pathways do you think they're experiencing? Is there anybody who would like to answer this question? You can raise your hand. Maybe we can hear from a parent, a brave parent. And please feel free to speak in Chinese. If you would like to answer the question in Chinese, please feel free to do that.
Hi, Laura.
Hello.
Yeah.
I think as the educator or caregiver, we're often we can be the person to make connections between different parts. So I don't know if that makes sense, but for example, in that shopping incident, you can give the child an extra obstacle to make his own decisions on. So I don't know, they've already made the decision to buy something, but you give them something new, like, oh, if you buy these 2 apples, did you know you can get a banana for free? And then maybe you can bring in some new vocabulary and tell them you can get a bunch of bananas for free. So you've built on their previous learning. So I think the educator can provide more opportunity and make connections between the things that the child is already playing with, and therefore the different parts of the brain that they're working.
Brilliant. And absolutely, that makes total sense. And that's the value of adults being playful and interactive. You get to challenge the child's brain and bring in something a little deeper, and when we do that, that's when you really do see a lot of master playing. An example that I've personally experienced, when I'm in a 3-year-old classroom and inevitably I get served some kind of food, then I'll ask for the bill, right? The check, please. And sometimes children will look at me and think, what are you talking about? And, sometimes children go, oh, yes, because they know, they've experienced that, but they forgot to add it to the play. You know, and depending on where the child is, you just keep going with that. Then they bring you some piece of paper, and then I'll say, oh, how much do I owe you? You know, and they have to come up with a figure, and then I will give them too much, or I'll give them too little and see what they do. So I do love what you've said. Yes, we can definitely scaffold as adults to see some of that master plan going, and remembering the holistic development, right? So the language, like you said, adding kind of role modeling, more sophisticated language as well. Great. Thank you. All right, another reflective question. So does anybody have an area they feel that they do really well? You know, is it physical or creative? Like if you think about the brain development, the children in your care, what is something that you see repetitively and you feel is really doing well? And maybe you can share your example or your story with us.
We have Iris. Hi. Iris, would you?
Yeah, I saw our teachers sometimes, you know, if it's like raining, that they will provide the raincoat and the shoes. They will let the children to feeling once raining what's happened in that date, and the children will very like it. And sometimes our teacher, they will let children on the playground. They can let children to listen what's the sound in the environment, and play and make the sound, use different materials. And that, I think, they just try to let the children to feeling, you know, and sometimes maybe it's in the learning environment that we set up some like the materials or the music, different, you know, like drum or piano or different kind of the things can make the sound. That also is let children to encourage them.
That's brilliant, Iris. That is so rich for the brain, you know, and even thinking about children's language, even though you're talking about instruments, you're teaching the brain to listen, right?
Yes.
So they start, so the brain, the neural pathways are learning to observe with my ears, which is so good for oral language. You know, I can start to teach my brain to listen carefully. And of course, with music, that's beautiful. With oral language, it's a brilliant example. I love that. And you know, I love it when teachers are brave enough to let children experience weather, because they don't get to often. I see children being dragged out of weather, you know, and so being able to go into the rain and actually experience the rain is incredible and very, very rich brain development. Just even in terms of connecting to nature as well, you know, our world around us. That's a lovely example. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Last one. We'll see if he's brave enough. All right. So where do you see an improvement? Where do you think there's an improvement that you can bring in to ensure optimal brain development and equal balance between nurture and nature? Anybody wish to share what they might take away from this session with the rest of us, or any idea? James. James.
Yes, would you like to share with that, James? Thank you.
Okay, am I on? Is that?
Yep.
Okay, great. I was going to say that I think it's important that we allow children the opportunity to explore and play in their own time. So as educators, we can provide children with resources and like a positive learning environment, but it's also important that they have that chance to nurture themselves and to have like you know, enough time to do things that they are interested in as well. So we can give them something to do, but then it's how they interact with that resource or in their environment that is important as well.
Yes, thank you, James. That's really great. Yes, ownership of play, right? We have to remember that children should own their play too, and giving them their space.
Of course, yeah.
Very important, yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. That's really great. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for me. Thank you all for listening and being part of this. We do have a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to ask some questions, you can just type it in there. And then, so for those of you who've stayed with us, the hour is up. So I'm really grateful that you've been here, and thank you for joining us and being part of this. If you would like to stay behind and ask some questions, please feel free to do that. And hopefully we see you all again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a question from Clifford.
Yes,
So,
probably relevant for a lot of parents these days. Any ideas how to use play to model behavior to encourage children? Yes, Clifford, we hear you and we feel you, and I'm afraid there is no simple answer for that, because it's not natural to have something over your nose and your mouth. And I think children know that. And so I think superhero would be something that comes to my mind. Superhero play, imaginative play and role play seems, for me, in my parenting and my experience in the classroom, I try to keep things humorous. I tend to get more out of the child when they think it's a game or when we're laughing. I'm not sure if that really is helpful, but I suppose, and it also depends on the age of the child, right? For very young children, it's instinctual. Like when they wear a hat, they just, you know, it's so instinctual. It feels like you're just fighting with them the whole time. Obviously, the older the child, the more you can talk to them about why we're doing it, but also try and make a bit of a game out of it. Did that answer your question? I don't know if Clifford, oh, okay. You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you, Bob. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I see we have some chats going on. Let me see. You're welcome. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. Zoe's raised her hand. Can we unmute her?
sure, yeah. I've unmuted you now, Zoe.
Oh,
Sure.
okay. Well, thank you so much. Sir, just a question. I'm teacher international school here, and I just wonder sometimes how to set a boundary. I mean, sometimes just relate to playing games, because sometimes I got extremely close with, kind of like close with kids. I play with them like during recess, but what happened is then they start blur the boundary. I'm being a teacher or just like kind of like their friend. I think personally, like we can still be like kids' friend and gain their trust, which is quite important. But on the other hand, kind of like how to set that boundary, that kind of confused me.
Yes, and that's a really great question. And actually, I have probably another 3 hours of workshop to do around that very question. I think the short of it is that being a friend is fine, and actually it's the right approach with children. But even in friendship, we have boundaries, right? I mean, so with my friend, if I treat her inappropriately or I'm mean or something, then as a good friend, I should be able to say that really, I didn't like that. That kind of hurts. You know, can you not say it that way or something like that? So when we work with children, because we're remembering the brain and the mimicking neurons, the mirror neurons, we as much as possible, we should role model to children genuine, authentic relationships. The problem is when teachers view themselves as kind of an authority and up above children, then we tend to control, and controlling doesn't really give children, in terms of neurology, they're going to learn to control, right? So we don't really want them controlling other children. We want them to engage in authentic relationships, which is a lot more challenging and complex, right? So in terms of you are the authority, because children want to feel safe. They want to know that the adult in the classroom's got their back. So we're not going to let them run on tables and go crazy like monkeys. You know, if you're going to climb on the table, I'm going to take you down, or you need to come down because it's not safe. And we can have boundaries. Like, it's not safe to run in a classroom. I don't want you to hurt yourself. But it comes from a place of authenticity, because I'm here to keep you safe. That's my job. Then I don't really want you running in the classroom. Oh, you're running in the classroom. Can you come and come sit down with me for a little bit? Let's give your legs some rest, because you're running in the classroom and it's not safe, right? So there's ways to put in boundaries that's respectful of the child, but does teach them that interaction and social relationships, we need to respect each other, and we need to respect kind of that agreed environment that we have. It's not as easy. I know that's really very simple, and it's a lot more complicated than that in the sense of skill. But yeah, so building trust. You know what? I can tell you this in my 20 years of experience with children. They're more likely to listen to a teacher that loves them and that they know who cares. They're less likely to listen to a teacher that they know doesn't really care about them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. You're welcome.
Sir, may I ask a question if that's okay, or other teacher and parents would ask?
Sure.
Okay, just like recently in Finland, they cancel to have the subjects to we don't no longer have the disciplines in interdisciplines for each subject in Finland. They're just gonna teach us one. So I just wondered to ask your opinion on this. Do you think that's a good idea? Like, we don't separate, this is math, this is mentoring, this is science, this is social studies?
Yes. I've always been a big fan of Finland. I think, you know, they've got the evidence to prove it. They're doing something right. But I think even though they are teaching one subject, they've integrated the subjects. So actually that, in a way, they've taken that brain development of integration, and they're trying out a new approach. So we'll see how well it goes. But I think even though it's integrated, they're still introducing those components of maths and language. I think the difference is because it's integrated, they have to apply it integrated, but they still need the skills. Like, they're still learning math, and they're still learning languages, and they're still learning how to write essays, but it's in application, it's more real life. So they might be given a situation, a project on, I don't know, solving world hunger. And then in that process, they actually have to do a lot of those areas that we would normally separate. They've just pulled them together. So I like the idea of it. We have to see, you know, we have to see how it, we have to wait for the result to see how it goes.
Yeah. I see. So it's more like comprehensive in a way. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're so welcome, Zoe. I see Jeff has asked a question. We understand how important free play is to early childhood development of a baby. The problem we have is that our daughter cries be time when we put her alone in the play area. She's 11 months now. Can you please share if there's any tricks to tackle this problem? Yeah. To be honest, we'd normally we would see Chloe. The name Chloe? Why did I call her Chloe? Just a baby. Children have temperaments. So different children have different temperaments. And of course, when we look at brain development, how those neurons are firing are going to be different. Same situation, but each child's brain will fire differently. I mean, we see this in families with siblings, right? Same set of parents, same environment, completely different people in a way. And how they perceive the world around them, how they process the world around them is different, which is why, again, Yu Chong is such a believer in individual education, because we have to, it's about learning about our child, like what is going on in their brain? How are they thinking? How are they perceiving it? And how do I interact and respond to bring the best out of them? It is quite common for babies to be quite clingy. Usually we look at attachment. There's something we call attachment theory, and we look at how the child is perceiving their attachment with their caregiver. There's actually a lot. Like, I'd have to ask you some questions. Like, one of the questions I'd ask you, Jeff, is if you have a helper, and who does your baby spend most of her day with? And so when you are putting her in a play space on her own, like, what has her normal day routine looked like? Because sometimes, so there's a lot of interaction that needs. So if you're on, you can raise your hand, then we can unmute you.
I've unmuted you now, Jeff.
Hi, he's away. I'm his wife. Yeah.
Hi, Jeff's wife.
Yeah, I'm Christina.
Hi, Christina.
Yeah. Yeah. So, basically, me and my maid, my helper is the caregiver, and we usually put her in her room for maybe 15 minutes. We want to put her for 15 minutes, but then she keeps crying while we were away. So we just wonder how we can tackle this problem.
Yeah, so actually it's very scary when a child can't see you. That's kind of like feeling like a time out. So she's probably not going to experience that in a very positive way. What would be better, especially at this age, is if you are in the area, so in her vicinity, but not particularly holding her or playing with her. So letting her play around you, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
that's completely fine for her. Just that while we were away, she couldn't stand it.
Yeah, and usually, and to be honest, that's healthy. She's safe with her primary caregivers, and she's in as long as when you are around, she seems independent, you know. So she doesn't need you, but she knows that you're there, so that's giving her. So actually, in terms of brain development, it's quite normal and healthy, and that's also why sometimes parents struggle with sleep time, because it's that same thing, right? It's leaving. Like, now it's bedtime and it's time for you to go to sleep, and I have to leave the room, and this is quite normal. Routine is probably the best. Can I ask why you want her to be in her room by herself?
Just that we need some free time for ourselves too. I suppose, because I'm working from home, so I need some time alone. Yeah.
So can you and your helper share?
Yeah, definitely. But eventually she needs time alone, right? So we just try to push this a bit further for her, but it seems that it doesn't really work on her at this stage.
No, she's a bit young for that, to be honest. And I have some not such great news for you. It's probably not going to happen until she's about 3.
Oh my God. So that's a long journey.
Yes, but that's why, you know, as adults, we have to kind of take care of ourselves too. So try and have some routine where you can swap off, right? And you have your time and the helper watches, and then the helper has her time and you watch.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Right, let's let's see. Yeah, Janet Lansbury. Mary has mentioned Janet Lansbury. Brilliant, brilliant lady. I highly recommend her and what she does. 2 hours a day. Yes, technology is something that obviously there's still a lot of research going on right now in terms of brain development and technology, but in general, early childhood doesn't have a very good feeling about screen time. And also because with brain development, I'll maybe just talk about concrete learning. So we talk about concrete learning, but in brain development, the sensory input is very different on a screen than in real life. And the real life sensory input is really important. We want children to have a feeling, like for example, when you're playing with sand, I'm gonna have resistance, there's weight pulls on my body. The sound it makes is different in different situations. There's nuances to daily living and play. Now the screen takes all of that away. The screen has also been known to make children's brains a little bit lazy because I can just watch, right? It doesn't really require much from me. So screen times overall is not highly recommended, but in small doses is fine. And I know for us parents in a very busy lifestyle, the screen does save us occasionally. So I won't say no screens, but yeah. So for young children, definitely watch the amount of screen time. I wouldn't say more than half an hour a day, and even that's quite high for some educators would say no screens till 2, and after 2 you shouldn't have more than 20 minutes a day. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Zoe, can we unmute Zoe?
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Just one more
You're
question.
welcome.
So, just wonder, because kids are very sensitive, like their critical age from 0-year-old to 3. But what about like kids after 6, when they enter primary, like 6 to like 12, their brain's still developing, but is that like if they have certain damage, like I'm sorry, my dog's barking, damage like happened during 0 to 6, is there a chance your brain's able to reconnect it or work out some way later from age of 6 to 12?
Definitely. Actually, there's some really interesting neuroscience research recently where people had half their brain removed, and the other side of the brain was able to take over some of those functions. And this is in older people. They're saying that the brain is very plastic, is very subtle, and can do some incredible things. So there's a lot of hope for later brain development. I think if we can get it right in early childhood, we set the children up for success. And that's why we want to get it right for early childhood, but it's never too late for anybody. So even children who are 6, 7, 8, given the right help, they can definitely reconnect and develop better neurons. And we can see that in habits, right? Habits is just neural pathway. When we have a habit, we've established a very strong neural pathway. And what happens is we have to retrain the brain, which is why it takes so long, like 30 or something days, and then you have to repeat it. And then you have a new neural pathway so that the habit then, then you get the new behavior becomes a habit. So it's definitely doable, but we want to try and set children up for success as much as possible, as early as possible. Does that answer your question, Zoe?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Is there any way like WeChat account or some way can still follow you, Nicky?
You're welcome to email us on the contact email, and we will keep in touch. This is part of a series seminar that we're doing once a month. So keep a lookout for the next one. And I think in our next one, we may have like a Facebook or a WeChat or some group.
Okay.
Sure. Not for this one, but in the next series, in the next session. So please come back for our next speaker.
Wow, thank you so much. That's my first time. I appreciate it. That's so great. Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe. All right, we have time for one more question. We're really over time, but that's okay. Let's have one more question. maybe someone raise their hands if you have a question, because I'm not sure I'm finding any here.
I've got one. I think. Try to unmute yourself. I think your screen name is 556. Start with 5567.
Is 556761, you asked a question about the iPads. Is that you? We do actually, when I was principal, we do have computers and iPads in our kindergarten classrooms for the specific use of science research. So what we want to teach children, in my opinion, about technology is that technology is a resource and a tool. So we would use it when children had an interest in something, whether it was ants or the space. And then they knew that we could find out more information, or we could use it as a learning tool. My problem is when schools use iPads as entertainment and to keep the children busy. Then it's an abuse of technology. It's not using technology for learning. And I believe that when done correctly, it's not that they're spending hours on a screen. It's part, and they're very active. So I've seen children who've Googled and they're on YouTube, and they're actually talking and interacting with each other. They connected with the teacher, and it's quite a social process. It's quite interactive, and it has a very strong purpose. It's not watching Frozen, though. If the iPad's being used to watch movies, then I think it's a waste of time. Does that answer your question? Online school, yes. Yes, online school, what can we say? Yeah, online interactive activities. Yeah, so we can't be too negative about screens, because it's helped us keep in touch with our children during COVID. And let's be honest, I think technology is part of our lives in a very big way, and this is the children's world now. So helping them to know that technology is a tool, and not to get addicted to so there is a lot we need to teach our children when it comes to technology. We need to help them manage what technology is for, and see the benefits of it and use it to better life, and make sure they're aware of the disadvantages of technology. But in terms of entertaining children, we don't want them to get lazy brains. We really want to activate those neurons, and that's where play is really essential. And I think for a lot of parents, and me as a parent, I've been there, we're tired at the end of the day, and sometimes we don't want to play. It just takes a lot out of us. So it's just understanding that even though we're tired, our children need time. Their brains need to play and process and interact and engage and read storybooks with you and play puppets. So we do have to be aware that the screen is too easy sometimes at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, so I hope I answered that question about screen time, but we're now almost 30 minutes over time. I just want to thank everybody for their time today, and I'm really grateful that you spent it with me and my colleagues. Thank you, Joan, for being our great helper online, and hopefully we'll see everybody in our next seminar, which will be coming up soon on SEN, so in early childhood, and that would be great. Right, shall we say goodbye?
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.